you know about the USA? Do you know about the government? Can you tell me about the Constitution? Hey, learn about the USA. In 1787, I'm told our founding fathers did agree to write a list of principles for keeping people free. The USA was just starting out a whole brand new country, and so our people spelled it out, the things that we should be. And they put those principles down on paper and called it the Constitution. And it's been helping us run our country ever since then. The first part of the Constitution is called the Preamble and tells what those founding fathers set out to do. We the people, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America.
What do you think about the United States Constitution?
I think it should be upheld, I think it should be obeyed, and I think it should be listened to, basically. People need to adhere to it. It's there for a purpose.
What do I think about it? Well, I guess the biggest question is it a living document? It can't be, because if it's not a living document, if it's a living document, then why write it down in the first place? If it doesn't mean anything, there's no purpose in putting things in writing if we're just going to do what we want anyway. So it has to be adhered to, has to mean something, and if we're going to go outside of it, it has to be changed to proper means.
Hi, I'm Andrew Breitbart. What do I feel about the Constitution? I think the last 2 years of my life have been spent defending the Constitution as much as I can, trying to get college students and school kids around the country to realize that their parents who are out there at tea parties are fighting for their futures, not for their greedy selves, that if you lose the Constitution, what do you have? Where's your freedom and liberty after that? And that's why I'm fighting for it, because it's the only thing that's protecting your freedom and liberty, and it's worth dying for.
Constitution?
I love the U.S. Constitution. I think it is a very empowering document for the citizens of this country. It's all about limiting government's rights and making sure that the individual is empowered and safe from government overreach. So it's a fabulous document. Love it.
And what is your name, ma'am?
Dana Lash.
Dana Lash from?
St. Louis Tea Party, CNN, and BigJournalism.com.
What do I think about the United States Constitution? I think it's a great document that we have to live by and survive by. It's not a living, breathing organism like some of them say. It's a piece of paper, and it's a contract that we have to abide by.
And that's where you start, and that's where you end. Look at it legislation.
What do you think about the United States Constitution?
I love the United States Constitution.
Thank you, sir.
Yes.
Mr. Kane, can I ask you one?
When we first started this little thing, who was here at the first tea party behind the library? You know, you guys are hardcore, committed. I love you, and everybody else too. That wasn't there, who's come along. Thank you for joining us. When we first started it, we were really passionately upset, I would say. We were a little afraid of some of the things that were starting to happen. Barack Obama had just passed a $1 trillion stimulus package. Prior to that, our good President George Bush, who I don't think really any of us recognized it at the time because we were always under siege as conservatives. He passed that TARP. But who remembers the two guys that were pushing that TARP big time? Can anybody name those two people? Who? No? No? Oh, did you say McCain? And who's the other guy?
Treasury Secretary.
He was a senator from Illinois. Barack Obama. You know, this movement didn't start off about Barack Obama. It doesn't continue about Barack Obama. It continues about a continued violation of the Constitution by our current occupants, not only in the White House, but throughout the executive branch, throughout the legislative branch, and to a certain degree in the judicial branch. And so we kind of rose up and said, we can't have this. We did it peacefully. We picked up our trash afterwards. We all took showers prior to. I don't think any of us took a shower during our Tea Party, did we? It only lasted like 2.5 hours out there behind the library. And man, when I saw you guys, it was smiles. Everybody was smiling. Everybody was happy. Everybody was passionately upset. But there was, man, it was fellowship. We were together. We were like family. And you know, I don't want to bring up the Occupy people and disparage them, but their movement is, believe it or not, and I know you're not going to believe it, but their movement is really heavily influenced by the left. Okay, they're Americans. They are. Okay, they're born here, they're raised here, they're cultured here. But somewhere along the line, their head kind of goes off in a weird direction, in the left direction. And these folks in an Occupy movement are nothing like us. Who was at the Occupy counter-protest? In Dekalb? Okay. We had an Occupy counter-protest. Who heard about the Occupy counter-protest we did? So we were down there, and Ulysses and myself got there, and nobody was there. And it was an empty street, barely a car going past. And I got there, Ulysses got there, then John Harmon got there. Thank you, John. And then before you know it, it was like 50 people showed up with flags. You know how good that felt? It felt awesome to know that other people believe what we believe. This isn't just politics, folks. This is about changing our country so we can all go back to playing golf. Okay? Who wants to go back to playing golf? Okay? On Saturday and Sunday. Who wants to go back to the NFL on Sunday? I do. Okay? So, thank you for being here. This is a celebration of the Constitution. If you saw that little video, the first one that I put on, that's a video that I captured at TCON. TCON happened about 2 weeks ago up in Schaumburg. Area tea parties from around the Chicago area. Glenn Beck was there. If you saw at the end of that video, it took me a lot to get that clip with Herman Cain. I had to fight off a bunch of press people. I had to fight off security people. I had to fight off the hotel people. Nobody wanted me in there, but I was going to get it. Okay? And I got it. It was fun. It wasn't that bad, but it was fun. So, thank you all for being here. The Tea Party has become educational, informational, and to kind of sound like Jesse Jackson-ish, transformational. Okay? We're working on things we're having the gritty and tough conversations with elected officials. Just ask Dave Syverson. I'm going to tell you right now, he doesn't like to hear me on the phone, I don't think. But, let me tell you something. When we're done, he has listened, and he has listened the whole time. He didn't hang up. I would have hung up. We've got to have the gritty conversations with elected leaders to hold them accountable. That's why we are a Tea Party. We're not going to go down in front of the Chase Bank and scream our guts out and make a difference. The conversations that we got to have with legislators and elected officials and people that want to run for office, that's why we have a Tea Party. The reason why we have a Tea Party is to get invested. Because if we're not invested in our Republican form of democracy, and all we think we can do is just go down to the voting booth and vote, we're gonna lose it. Okay? Elected officials need to know that, well, number one, that we support it when they make the right decision, but even more so, when they make a bad decision, we let them know, don't do it again, you naughty legislator. And smack their hand, okay? That's why we have a Tea Party. We don't have a Tea Party so we can just kind of like, oh, you know, we're just kind of like sitting here. We have a Tea Party because we want to get invested at every possible level we can be invested at. I just want to mention Nicole Salmon. Say hi, Nicole. Nicole is a young lady who's just started at the Tea Party, kind of just getting involved with the Tea Party. She is fighting a battle regarding the asphalt plant. Now, I'm not saying we support that battle. I'm just saying she's here, and activists are here, and joining, and believing, and seeking answers. Because there's problems in our government. Our government's busted. It's broke. We've got continuing resolutions. We've got debt ceiling things. We got $15 trillion worth of debt, with $400 billion a year in interest payments. Who gets rich off $400 billion a year? Not you and me. So those are the kind of things that we're fighting here, okay? So, with that said, let me introduce our next guest.
Thank you very much, David. I'm glad David's the MC for this thing. That guy knows how to light a fire under people, doesn't he? Well, I prepared this last night. I know the topic pretty good. I hope I can put it out there in a way that makes sense. Before I start, I want to recognize two people that are on our team. I'll give you a little background. The election last 2010, early November. By the 20th of November, Tea Parties from across the state met in Lyle area and decided where are we going to put our energies for the next 2 years to make sure this person in the White House has a one-term president. And we made up our minds there were areas to concentrate on, and the one that tugged at my heart was election integrity. I say, what good does it do us to change minds and hearts all over the state of Illinois if they're only going to steal the election from us? Yep. So I think if you get that logic, that fully a fourth of every Tea Party ought to be dedicated for the next year to working on election integrity in the state of Illinois. Now, I have two gentlemen that we've recruited, and they're here, and I want to just let you know they've taken a little responsibility. The first one, and Pete, will you stand? Pete Malone from the 14th Congressional District. He is the coordinator for the Fair Tax. And we wanted Pete on our committee because he knows elections inside, out, and backwards. And he will be a great asset to us. Also in Rockford, Charles Campbell. Will you stand? Charles is an engineer. He's a software guy and in quality. And we talked and we thought, why shouldn't quality control organizations across this nation take an interest in the integrity of elections? After all, elections are processes. Quality control has to do with controlling a process. If we could get engineers on board, you know, those people with those pens in their pockets, we could maybe make a real difference in elections. But let's go to Illinois. Illinois is a laughing stock across the nation, total laughing stock. We know the dead vote here. Let me tell you how it used to happen. I got a call from a lady a few months back. She said her mother used to be an election judge for Mayor Daley and counted the votes. Well, when they handed the ballots to people, if you were a guy that regularly voted Republican in the primaries, they knew you. They would crease the ballot with their thumbnail, which had been grown especially long for that purpose. and hand you the ballot. And of course, the guy would fill it out. He'd plop it in the barrel. Then, after the polls closed, they'd dump the ballots. They'd pull out every one that had a crease, and dang, it was a spoiled ballot. It couldn't be counted. And that's how Mayor Daley did it then, in those days. What a system, huh? Okay, now, times are different. We've gotten modern. We have technology. So, how can we make elections in Illinois clean and fair? There is, I think, a prevailing pessimism on everyone's part. We really don't think we can change it. How can we fight the machine? There's a woman, her name is Bev Harris. We invited her last March to come speak to us. She was upset that some elections in Washington state had pretty clearly gone to some funny people. And so she was, by her profession, an investigator and decided to investigate it. There is a film. One of the cable networks followed her around for 3 years and made this documentary, which is called Hacking Democracy. It is about election fraud, and specifically about electronic voting, which may be hacked, and that's computer talk for messed with. This video is available from Amazon for $17, shipping included. Now, getting rid of electronic voting is not a task that our Election Integrity Initiative has taken on. That's for another day. That's for a day when maybe we have a different majority in Illinois. We're going to take on tasks. Is this our legislators? No? When they come, send them to that table. We got food for them. So there, on our table, I didn't pass it out for you, but if you'd go to the red table, would you wave for us, Georgine? We have a sheet for every one of you. Red, white, and blue sheet tells what are the 6 election initiatives that the Illinois Tea Party is promoting at this time. One area that is a terrific loss to us is the military vote. This is one of our initiatives. The military has been systematically kept from voting or having their votes counted. And we know what the motive is. We have a feeling how their votes would come down. Now let me say first, election integrity is a nonpartisan initiative. We believe that Democrats and Republicans of goodwill want their vote counted. They want it counted once. They don't want dead people voting. They don't want Mickey Mouse voting or the entire starting lineup of the Dallas Cowboys, which was what Acorn registered to vote in several states. So we are a nonpartisan effort. We are attempting to recruit people in every one of the 102 counties across the state of Illinois to help in this effort. We will need poll watchers. We will be training them a month ahead of the March 20th primary, a month ahead of the November 4th, 6th election. This is not your typical party poll watcher where you check off the name of Mr. Smith, who always votes Republican in the primaries, and we wanted him to show up at the polling place. This is a different kind of poll watcher, a poll watcher with eyes, a poll watcher that is watching the actual conduct of the election in the polling place. We will be working on those standards and what is needed. We will also be looking for people who are maybe experienced election judges. We will be drawing up a list of best practices for the conduct of elections and asking one or two persons in every county to evaluate their election jurisdiction. Then, maybe 8 to 6 weeks ahead of the election, we're going to publicize the grades of every county. How did they do? And perhaps if the public will be concerned, if all of us involved will have been writing letters to the editor, educating our neighbors about election integrity, we might have a crack at cleaning up Illinois elections. Let's talk about one big area of vulnerability. It is called early voting. Did you know that your election voting is, I believe, 5% audit is conducted? It's a state law. They audit 5% of the vote in every county. Early voting isn't subject to this. Now, let's say there's 2 weeks of early voting. Let's say there's 80 hours of it at the county clerk's office. In 3-hour shifts, that would be 17 shifts if we got people to observe early voting in the county clerk or city of Rockford or Boone County, whatever, election office. Did you know that in Minnesota, about 100 people from a home for the mentally handicapped were herded into the Crow Wing County election authority for early voting? One young man who at the age of 12 saved his sister from drowning and suffered brain damage from lack of oxygen. He told his parents that he voted for Gerald Ford, and wasn't that nice? Well, actually what he did was he voted a straight Democrat ticket because the kind members of AFSCME, American Association of Federal, State, County, and Municipal Employees, all pushing for the Democrat Party because they are a state union. They just had all these mentally handicapped people voting straight Democratic. It was really a coinky-dink that all those folks wanted to vote Democratic. Okay, now Republicans have cheated in elections too. I'm aware of some of them. This is a nonpartisan effort, but if we had people in the early voting offices, if there had been people in the early voting offices in Crow Wing, Minnesota, they would have called a cadre of attorneys, which we have. We have a cadre of attorneys which will be standing by on election day waiting for calls so that we can be proactive, avoid the errors of the past. We can do it, Illinois. We can clean up our elections. It will take all of us, a lot of us, various areas. Please don't leave without taking that sheet on our table where Georgine is sitting. I thank you all for coming. You're wonderful people, and we support each other, and we love each other, and we are each other's strength. Thank you.
How's everybody doing? Let's hear it for David Hale. This guy runs a fairly strong Tea Party, and I appreciate that. I feel like I'm back on the campaign trail for Illinois Comptroller. But no, I don't want to do that. Let me tell you. I have been busy, though, since then, looking for as many ways to get in trouble as possible. No, actually looking for as many ways to continue to stand up and speak out and fight back and do it in a way that unifies conservatives, just as each and every one of you and David and all of our candidates here today have done. And I decided, because of my background, I have a production company out of Chicago, to do that by exercising not only my freedom of speech, but my freedom of the press. During the campaign for comptroller, I wrote a blog called the Kelly Truth Squad. I don't know if anyone remembers that, but I wrote it because one of my primary opponents spent his entire campaign spreading lies, smears, gossip, and innuendo about me. And I want to say that only half of what he was saying was actually true. So, Anyway, after the campaign, the Washington Times contacted me and asked if I would be willing to write the Tea Party report. And I said I would be honored to write the Tea Party report. And I've been doing that every week since then. And I also started a radio show called the Kelly Truth Squad. And I thought that, that this would be an opportunity for me to go out and to ask questions that the mainstream media was not willing to ask. Little did I know what I was getting myself in for. Actually, I think I kind of did know what I was getting myself in for, to be honest with you. A year ago, I guess it was a year ago, because it was at the Columbus Day Parade, and I was just at this year's Columbus Day Parade in Chicago. I walked up to a candidate named Rahm Emanuel, who was running for mayor of the city of Chicago. There was only one problem with that. Being a candidate myself, I knew that there are residency requirements. And Rahm Emanuel did not fulfill the residency requirement to be a candidate for mayor of the city of Chicago. You have to legally be a resident for 1 year. He was in Washington, D.C., okay? And he also took the extra step of leasing his house out, thus forfeiting his legal residency status in Chicago. So I walked up to him. Some of you may have seen the video.
So how's it like to be back in Chicago?
It's great always be home. As I like to say, sweet home Chicago.
Quick question for you.
Hold on.
Who are you with? We're with WIND Radio.
Hey, Rob. How you doing, buddy? Good, you?
There are a lot of people that speculate that the stimulus was actually just a payback to your Wall Street friends that made you a multi-millionaire. What do you say to those people?
How are you? What are you guys doing?
Have you been able to straighten out the residency issues yet?
No, I'm okay.
Have you been able to straighten out your residency issues?
Excuse me, sir. He's not
do the laws apply to you as well?
For a week. What have you been hearing from Chicagoans?
How you feel about veterans? Excellent. I'll be right over there to talk to you about it. Okay. You guys okay? No, I'm gonna wait a little.
So do you have your residency situation figured out?
Do
you have your residency situation figured out? Hey, I am too. I'm with WIND Radio. I do a show on WIND. What are you talking about? Wait a second. I do a show on WIND. No, you have to go away. What are you talking about? Don't tell me what to do. Hey, so are you his press secretary?
No, I'm not.
Are you Rahm Emanuel's press secretary?
And that's not
really? Well, then why don't you ask him about his residency?
All right, tell you what. Let's go over.
Does Rahm Emanuel have to play by the rules that everybody else has to play by?
Cool.
And every one of you should be like Ulysses and bring a camera with you wherever you go from now on, let me tell you. In fact, I'm sure each and every one of you already has a camera in your pocket. It probably also takes phone calls, or makes phone calls. But at any rate, what happened was I asked him what I thought was a legitimate question. How is your residency status? One of the other reporters at the event, a guy named Jay Levine, the senior correspondent for CBS News, came over and threatened to deck me. Okay? So not only did I not get my question, but I saw how the media in Chicago really operates. What they're really all about is protecting the politicians, not asking them the questions. I took the extra step with my radio show of challenging Rahm Emanuel's petitions for mayor. We did a lengthy petition challenge, and as it turned out, Rahm Emanuel was deemed to be a candidate for mayor of the city of Chicago. He's currently a candidate. Let me tell you something, or he's currently the mayor. Let me tell you something. If any one of you were running for mayor of the city of Chicago, you would have been thrown off the ballot. What is the difference between you and Rahm Emanuel? What is the difference? Okay, well, I still don't know exactly what that is, but one thing is for sure, he is held to a different standard, a different letter of the law, or spirit of the law than you are, and that's not right, that's not fair. And as our next speaker, Chad, will tell you, that diminishes us as human beings, okay? When one person's rights are protected, or has extra rights, and somebody else's are diminished and degraded. Not only did Rahm become mayor, but I ended up getting fired from WIND Radio as a result of that. So there is, there's a price to be paid for standing up for your beliefs, but there's also, as David will point out, it's extremely important to stand up. I have gotten signed with another radio station, so you'll be hearing more about that very soon. I hope I have 3 more stories that I want to cover. One is Solyndra, so I might only be on the radio for about a week. So I'm going to try to have Chad and a few other people, David, on the show as quickly as possible before I get thrown off. But the most important thing is that we do stand up, that we do speak out, that we do fight back, and that we do it in a unified manner. Like Benjamin Franklin once said, we can hang together or we can hang alone. And I never knew what a hipster Benjamin Franklin was. He wants us to hang, okay? So let's hang together, all right? Thank you.
And William didn't even tell you about. Here, let me try and do an impression. This is Jim Anderson of the Illinois Radio Network. Can you turn those lights off, please? Turn those on. This is Jim Anderson of the Illinois Radio Network. You ever heard that voice?
No.
Okay, well, Jim Anderson, he's the voice of the Illinois Radio Network, and he does the hourly news on like WROK, WNZA. They sign up to syndicate with that. Jim Anderson, I thought he was a nice guy. He was at Tea Party Express, part of the press conference we had and everything. Jim Anderson threatened to deck him, okay? And I'm not kidding. William just walked up to Dick Durbin and said, "Sir, we've just faced a critical downgrade for our credit rating. Can you tell me, do you feel responsible for that at all, sir?" "Get out of here, blah, blah." It was terrible. It was at the City Club of Chicago. So this guy is a warrior. He's not afraid to get in there. So thank you, William. I appreciate you being there. Thank you.
Senator, you've blamed everybody for the downgrade, but yourself. I write for the Washington Times community section. You've blamed everybody for the downgrade except for yourself, Senator. Senator,
will you be quiet?
No.
Please?
Why don't I get to ask a question?
Because you're not
Senator,
with the press. Get
I
out
am
of the
with
room.
the press.
Let's try this. It's early in the morning. How cool is it to be free? Amen. Do you ever stop and appreciate the little things about being free? Do you ever just stop in your daily life and think, how cool is it that I get to do this? All right, good. I'm not the only one. Sometimes I do things like I'll walk into the grocery store and I just stop and think, there's food in this store, in this building, from all over the world. I can have any of it that I want. I can eat as much as I want today. How cool is that? How many people in history have been able to say that? How many people today can say that outside of this country? Not too many. Being free is an amazing blessing. We have it so great, we don't even know that. I'll give you an example of how good we have it. Trust me. Last week, my wife sent me to the grocery store to get frozen peas for our boys. Has anybody had the frozen vegetables in the steamer bags? Are those not the greatest thing ever? I love those things. So I go into Loveley's and I'm looking for the peas in the steamer bag. They didn't have any. And I honestly stood there, no joke, stood there in the aisle for a minute or two and thought, seriously? I mean, I got to put the peas in a bowl, and then in the microwave? Oh, man. This is how good we have it now. Somebody needs to go to the Occupy Wall Street people and tell them this. I mean, 150 years ago, people would spend a good percentage of their day preparing meals. Now, we get a little antsy if we have to put the vegetables in a bowl and then in the microwave. Freedom, and this is all because of freedom. It's an amazing thing. But the problem is, we've gotten so accustomed to it, we're so used to it, that we just assume that's the natural, that's the way things are, and it's just not true. Freedom is the exception, it's not the norm. How many people in the world have been free in the history of the world? We're the tiniest fraction of people that have ever been able to experience these things. Like, my mom. Tell her I'll call her back. I got to talk to Debbie last night, and she said, I talk to people, and they don't get it. How do we get them to understand? They don't care. The truth of the matter is, unless they realize that our freedom can go away in an instant, they're not going to care. They think that what we're fighting over are tax rates or minor policy differences between Democrats and Republicans or things like that. They don't realize that what we're talking about is the difference between slavery and freedom. And until they get that, they aren't going to care. We have to explain these things to them. Because those things that we read about in the Soviet Union or in China or all these different places that horrible things happen, they can happen here. There's nothing special about this country other than our ideas and our ability and willingness to defend them. This land isn't special. We as people aren't better than anybody else. Those things can happen. They're not relics of the past. They happen today. And they can happen here. And until people appreciate that, we're going to have troubles. But one of the best ways that we can get them to understand that, one of the best ways that we can be active and do our part, like Jane had talked about, is to understand the Constitution. That is one of the first and most primary things everybody has to do. And of course, part of the problem is it's not good enough anymore to just understand the Constitution. Because the fact of the matter is, most of our public officials, most of the people who run our government, don't appreciate and respect the authority of the Constitution anymore. In that situation, we have to make the case for the Constitution all over again. It's not good enough anymore to know what's in the Constitution. We have to know why it's in there. We have to know how it works. So that's what we're going to focus on today. If you read the program, you know we're going to talk about rule of law, which might not sound terribly sexy and exciting, but the bottom line is you cannot have freedom without rule of law. They're not, you can't separate the two. So we're going to talk about that. And by the way, does anybody think it would be a good idea to get lobbyists and the money out of Washington, D.C.? Stick with me at the end and you will see a very, very simple way that we can get rid of the lobbyists. You hear all our politicians talk about how this is the hardest thing in the world, get rid of the lobbyists, and they want this big, obtuse bill to try to do it, and they pander to you about how they're going to do it. Bottom line is it's real simple, and you're going to find out the fact that it's not that they can't get rid of the lobbyists, it's that they don't want to. So, as we get into rule of law, let's start by asking a very simple question. What two things cause corruption? If you boil it all down to its most basic level, what two things cause corruption? Money and power. Pretty simple, right? Money and power. So if you're going to create a free society, if you want to create a government that's going to allow people to be free, one of the main focuses that you need to have is limiting the amount of power and money that goes into the government. Because freedom and corruption don't go together. They're incompatible. A corrupt government will never protect your freedom for long. Well, one of the easiest ways to limit the power and the money in any government is rule of law. So it's critical that we understand exactly what it is and exactly how it works. I think a lot of people, for those of you that have heard of rule of law or are familiar with it, think of it as, it doesn't matter who you are, if you break the law, it applies to you. And that's a part of it. Enforcement is a part of it. But it actually has a lot more to do with how the laws are written. And actually, I hadn't planned on this, but Jane and David put some awesome booklets in the back on the road to serfdom. Does everybody grab one? They're free, right, Jane? Otherwise, I'm a thief.
Yes, David.
David, where's David go?
I think they are free.
Okay, otherwise I'm a thief. I'll just let you know. Okay, these are on the back table. If you've ever read Road to Serfdom, he does an entire chapter on rule of law, so you're going to see a lot of the same ideas in here that I'm going to go over today. Basically, with rule of law, we want to make sure our laws are written with two characteristics. They need to be consistent, and they need to be comprehensive. So when we see laws being crafted, and we see our legislators trying to put things together, you got it? Everybody wants to call all of a sudden. Hasn't been a problem all morning until now. As we're crafting legislation, as we're watching what's going on, you as a citizen want to look for those things. Look for things that are consistent and comprehensive. And so we're going to show you what those two things are so that you know what you're looking for. The first C is consistent. For our laws to be consistent, they need to be straightforward and simple so that you as a citizen can understand what they mean. We want them to be predictable. So basically we want to know where we stand with relation to the government. We want to know that if we do X, then the government's going to do Y. Pretty simple. Does anybody here like football, by the way? I know David does. The cool thing about football is a lot of the rules there, if you want to look for examples, follow the rule of law. They're great examples of this. For example, who can tell me what the penalty is for holding? 10 yards. And any even moderate football fan can tell you when they see holding. If they see holding, they know what it is. They also, obviously, can tell you that it's a 10-yard penalty. So they know if they see holding, then there's a 10-yard penalty. So the average person can know where they stand with respect to the law and predict the outcome. That's what we want to see from our laws. We want to know that if we do X, the government will do Y. And there's a simple reason why that protects your freedom so well, is it allows you to maximize your ability to be free. Because you know what you're doing, you know where you stand, so you can go out and get your goals, go out and create your life, create a plan for your life, knowing that as long as you don't break the rules, the government's not going to bother you. Does that make sense? Think about freedom of speech. If the First Amendment's pretty absolute, it says you can say what you want. Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of speech. So you're pretty free to say what you want. Now if it was something else like Congress shall make no law abridging reasonable speech, where you don't really know where you stand, how free are you going to be able to go out and say what you want if you don't know if what you say might land you in prison or have your family being punished for you or something to that effect? If you don't know, you can't really go out and maximize that freedom and make the most of it. So that's how a consistent law protects you. Now, to go back to football for a minute, because I like it. To go back to football for a minute, you'll notice that the referees don't have a whole lot of discretion in how they apply those laws, do they? Apply those rules. I mean, you're never going to see an umpire or a referee come out and say, "Man, did you see how bad that guy held him? We're going to have to do 20 yards on that. That was bad." I mean, just seeing that in the context of football, you see how absurd it is to try that, right? Well, think about it in the context of the law. It's the same thing. We can't give a lot of discretion to the people that are applying the laws. The referee in football knows that his job is to find holding and apply a 10-yard penalty. That's it. We want to hold our local administrators and bureaucrats and whoever it is applying the law, they need to have as little discretion as possible. There's two reasons for that. Very simple reasons why that will protect your freedom to keep them to give them as little discretion as possible. Number one, if there's a wide range in how that law is going to be applied, there's probably going to be some people willing to pay that administrator to apply it the way they want in there. At best, they may threaten them, blackmail them, bribe them, any number of things. All of them bad. So that leads to corruption, which is incompatible with freedom. So we need to make sure that we don't put them in that position. The other reason why we don't want them to have that much discretion is because then it creates an inconsistent law. Because how the law is going to be applied depends on who's in that office. So each election, the law might change based on who's enforcing it, or who has that job. Or it could change county to county, or city to city. So then you don't know what the law is. It makes it almost impossible for you to know the law and obey it. So we need to make sure that the law doesn't have that wiggle room for our local administrators. So how does this apply to real life? Because that's all you care about, right? We want to know how this works. Well, let's look at how these things work in real life. Think about the TARP bill that President Bush had signed in 2008. Everybody is familiar with this, right? Oh, no. Okay, good. Now I'm seeing some heads nod. I'm like, oh, no, I'm the only one that heard about that thing? This is not good. Okay, so the TARP bill. That's the bill that they used as an excuse to bail out the car companies. And once the government had that leverage over the car companies, they used it to intimidate them or force them into severing the dealership contracts with a lot of dealers, right? To this day, nobody really knows the criteria they used to pick which dealers were going to lose their businesses and which didn't. Now, lot of people I see shaking your heads think they got a pretty good gut on what the criteria was. But that aside, the bottom line is nobody really knows for sure how they decided which dealers were going to keep their business and which weren't. Now, these people, for a lot of them, this is their family business. This was their livelihood, how they fed their family. It was their whole life. And it was gone. And they don't know why. Now, how are they supposed to plan for that? How are they supposed to plan their lives? Say 10 years ago, how are they supposed to set their business up to make sure that the government wouldn't come in and take it? No way. They couldn't. Right? They had no clue what was going to happen. Now, if that was your dream, to be a car dealer, and to have the best car dealer, and to serve your community, or what have you, now that you've seen that that can be taken away in an instant, are you going to invest your life savings into improving your car dealership or expanding it? I'm not. If you were thinking of buying a car dealership, that was your dream. Are you thinking of buying a car dealership knowing that it could be taken away the next day for no reason? I'm not. Think anybody else in other industries saw that and maybe it made them a little nervous? Probably. It should. So those people, if their dream was to be a car dealer, to own a business, they're not able to go out and maximize that freedom and make the most of their lives because they don't know where they stand in front of the government because there are arbitrary laws. Now, if you read what Hayek says in The Road to Serfdom here, he sums it up pretty simple. Rule of law means fixed laws that everybody knows ahead of time. Pretty simple. But that's exactly the opposite of what we had in that TARP bill. Those people didn't know the rules ahead of time, and they're completely arbitrary, based on whoever was in the office. So that's what we want to look for in the first C. We want to see laws that are consistent. So as they're being crafted, ask yourself, do I understand this law? Is it straightforward, and does it leave a lot of arbitrary wiggle room for bureaucrats to apply however they want to whoever they want? So that's consistent. The second C is comprehensive. Basically, the law has to apply to everybody the same way. That means no more loopholes, no more exemptions, no more waivers. Don't you love waivers? What have they been doing a lot of waivers on again? Oh, that's right, the healthcare bill. See, a good law is a law that's good for everybody. Now, you'll notice with the healthcare, that doesn't seem good for everybody, does it? If it was, you wouldn't see how many waivers now?
2,000, is it?
I think it's 2,000, something like that. So apparently that law wasn't good enough for 2,000 people. And if you have the right connections, you can get out of the law. This will not protect your freedom. This actually will lead directly to the destruction of your freedom. Let's go back to the NFL for a second. You'll notice I keep going back there. Holding is simple. It applies to everybody. It doesn't matter what position you play, what team you play for, how much money you make. It applies to you. It's across the board. Holding is holding. Think about how competitive the NFL is. If you could have a law or a rule, I mean, just imagine how absurd it is, but imagine if there was a rule that said, holding is a 10-yard penalty unless you play for the Chicago Bears, in which it's a 5-yard penalty. Yeah, granted, their offensive line could use all the help they could get. Which, by the way, I'm going to try out for the Bears offensive line next year. I figured they can't do any worse. So I might as well get paid a few million a year to let them sack Jay Cutler. But you can see how absurd it is to assume that there's going to be one team that law or that rule is different for. But if you could create that kind of advantage for a football team, what do you think those NFL owners would do to get that advantage? Just about anything, right? They'd pay them off. They'd do whatever they have to get that little bit of an advantage. Now, if you had a company that could get a special advantage of law that would give them an advantage over their competitors, what do you think they'd do for that? Probably just about anything, right? Where do you think lobbyists come from? They're there because it's profitable. Lobbyists aren't just super patriotic people that moved out to Washington to be a part of government. They're there because it makes them money. Because companies know, and special interest groups, and political action groups, and all these different people that are lobbying the government know that if they spend tens of millions of dollars lobbying our congressmen, that they can get hundreds of millions of dollars worth of kickbacks and paybacks and payoffs and whatever else kind of corrupt nonsense that they get. That's why they're there. We've created a situation where there's a lot of power and money to be gained from having a public office. Now what does power and money lead to again? Corruption. Corruption's not compatible with freedom. So you see how we don't want to have those loopholes for the congressmen to pass out? They have to apply the law to everybody and create a consistent law. So there are two ways that having a comprehensive law are going to protect your freedom. The first is that it limits the power of congressmen. They have one thing to trade in that gives them that power and money. They know that they can go out and sell those loopholes or give those loopholes to people, and that gives them the power over those companies that they're looking for. So you're limiting the power of congressmen. And if you limit that power, if they no longer have that little goodie to give out to the special interest groups, lobbyists will go home on their own. Right? We don't need some big law or fantastic, huge piece of legislation that nobody understands. We just need the congressmen to stop feeding them. Apply the rule of law, and the majority of lobbyists will go home in a few days because it's not profitable anymore. And it's like having a bunch of stray cats. If you stop feeding them, they'll go away. It's not that difficult. So that's the first way. The second way, and this is critical. I'm almost done, so this is my last point. We'll do this. This is critical. If you remember nothing else, remember this. It's a key principle. It's human nature for us to look out for our own interests before other people's interests, right? Congressmen are, for the most part, humans. So, you need to go there and say yes. But they're human. It's human nature for them to look out for themselves. So if they're going to look out for your interests or their own interests, who are they going to look out for? Themselves, almost every time. You try to imagine, with a straight face, one of our congressmen, let's say Dick Durbin, saying, "Gosh, Mr. Special Interest Group, it sure would be nice to have all that power and money, but I'm here to represent the constituents." It's not going to happen. I mean, we think they should, but they're not going to do that. So there's one way to ensure that our interests are represented. There's only one way. We have to make sure that their interests are our interests. We have to make sure that what hurts us hurts them. What's good for us is good for them. And when you have that correlation, when their interests are tied to ours, they will represent you. Because they can't help themselves without helping you. Look at it very basically. This is the best protection for your freedom right there. Look at it this way. No reasonable person will vote to strip themselves of freedom. No one will vote to oppress himself. And if they won't vote to oppress themselves, they won't vote to oppress you. It's simple. And look at the health care bill. Do you think for a second they would have voted for that if they thought they were going to get the same third-rate health care we're stuck with? There's no way. So you have to make sure that they know that when they're done with their term and they go home, they have to live under the exact same laws that they impose on everybody else. Period. So you got to get rid of these special pensions that they have that help them live for, the special health care and all that. They have to know that they're going to be in the exact same situation as you are when they're done in office. Now, as David mentioned, I'm running out of time, so I'd like to close by encouraging you to get involved. Just give me 2 minutes because this is over 2 minutes or less. Please get involved. We all have to do our part to protect our freedom because it can vanish. You all have talents that you can lend to this. There's so much that you can do. Don't let anybody tell you that you can't make a difference. Whether you're involved in it as a board member here, as a Tea Party, you're running for office, or whatever. Get involved. See, I always knew it was our purpose to do our part, but I didn't always do mine. When I graduated from college in 2001, I had no idea what I wanted to do. So I bounced from one mediocre job to another, and I did a terrible job at every one. I feel bad for my bosses because I'm such a terrible thing. By the time 2007 rolled around, I had no job, I had no goals, and I had no purpose. So I spent a lot of time sitting on the couch watching the news on TV, and I would scream at the TV because I could see how they were taking our freedom right there. But I never got off the couch. For as long as I can remember, I've always been fascinated by freedom, the Constitution, just that revolutionary period in this country. So I've read as much as I could about it. I can't remember a time when I wasn't trying to learn about those things. And it was at that time in 2007, I was still reading those books, and I came across a quote from Ronald Reagan. And you've probably heard it before. He said, "Freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction." We don't pass it on in a bloodstream. It has to be fought for, protected, and passed on for the next generation to do the same. If we don't, we may spend our sunset years telling our children and our children's children what it was like once in the United States, back when men were free. Ronald Reagan is right. If we don't protect our freedom, it will go in an instant. And when I realized that, I thought about it. I realized that if I did not do something, if that day ever came, my children may come to me and say, "Dad, when they took our freedom, what did you do about it?" And I was going to have to look at them and say, "I sat there on the couch and I watched it happen. That's not acceptable for me." Since that day, I've helped people from all over the country understand the Constitution and how to protect their freedom better. And now, if that day ever comes and we lose our freedom, and my sons come to me and they say, "Dad, when they took our freedom, what did you do about it?" I will look at them and I will say proudly that I did everything I could. What do you want your answer?
While Representative Knilans sets up his computer, we have a slideshow for you from some pictures in Madison, which was the epicenter of all the protests in February. I'll just give you a little background information. I'm Representative Evan Wynn, Representative Joe Knilans. Like the introduction said, I spent 22 years in the military, 4 in the Marine Corps as an infantryman, and 18 in the Army as a paratrooper. A lot of people ask me if I was prepared for what happened in February in Wisconsin. I tell them, well, as a paratrooper, I jumped behind enemy lines, was surrounded, fought my way out. Sort of like Madison, February 17th. About Madison or being a paratrooper? Both are true. What had happened is the governor came to our caucus and briefed us, I believe it was a Wednesday afternoon, that his budget repair bill, and what a budget repair bill is the past 20 years in Wisconsin, we have a constitutional amendment that says our budget has to be balanced. Well, they've used gimmicks and tricks and shell games to do that for the past 20 years. And then what happens is they'll agree to all this spending, but push off the payment of the bill into the next budget cycle. So what happened is, and our budget runs from 1 July to 30 June. And if you run out of money before 30 June, you have to have a budget repair bill. And usually how Governor Doyle and the Democrats did it, they made sure that they ran out of money after we got elected, so we'd have to deal with it. So they got to hand out big money to school districts, universities, colleges, whatever special interest group they wanted to, and then we had to tap. So the governor's plan was, it was pretty much 2 choices he had. He could lay off about 15,000 state employees throughout the state, or he could ask for them to pay 5% into their own retirement and 12% for their own health care. And you have to understand, state employees have a health care plan that's considered a Tier 1 health care. No copay, no deductible, see any doctor they want, go overseas, see any doctor you want, it's paid for. It's a pretty good health care plan, more than most people that work for private companies have. So the governor decided it wasn't too much to ask public employees to pay a little toward their retirement, a little toward their health care. But to do that, we had to get rid of collective bargaining, because collective bargaining with public employees hasn't really worked out that well for Wisconsin. Because I actually have a manual from the Teachers Association that tells them how to get their own employer elected. Because what they want to do is get elected former teachers to the school board, to the local government, the county, and to the state. That way when they negotiate, they're negotiating with one of their own. Why unions may work with private companies is you have the owner who's not going to give away his business negotiating against the union. In public sector, you have the unions that are negotiating with a politician who then more likely got elected. So it usually doesn't work out too good for the taxpayer. So the governor came in and briefed us on Wednesday that his plan to cover this debt was to remove collective bargaining for public employees and have them pay toward their retirement and their health care. We went onto the floor on Friday. We started the vote. Our speaker, Jeff Fitzgerald, knew he thought he had enough votes to get it passed. We have a large enough Republican majority in Wisconsin that we can lose 10 votes, 10 Republicans can go vote with Democrats, and we can still pass the bill. I personally think there was 12 no votes before that weekend. But the speaker says he had enough votes, so we went to the floor. We were about an hour into the floor session when the Capitol Police Chief came up to him and said, "We can no longer guarantee the safety of you or your members. We want you out of the Capitol building because we're about ready to be overrun." Now, I remember being in Baghdad escorting a general officer in the Ministry of Justice when we got intel we were about ready to be overrun. Never thought I'd hear those words in America. But the speaker called us into his office, told us to go home. We went home. Over that weekend, unions and their members decided they were going to protest at select legislators' homes. So one morning, Representative Knilans woke up, and out in front of his house were protesters. One morning at 6:30 in the morning, that's the time my wife goes to work, protesters out in front. But fortunately for me, I knew they were coming, so 33 of my friends showed up, most of them members of the Rock River Patriots and Tea Party groups in Wisconsin, and they were there about 6 o'clock for a 6:30 protest. One of them's getting out of his truck, walking toward my house, and this guy gets out of his car, a non-American made car man. And he looks at the guy and he said, "Well, I'm glad you're here. It looks like we're the only two guys here to protest against Wynn." And the guy said, Bob said, "No, I'm with Wynn." And so the first protester showed up at 6:35. And I know probably Joe doesn't like me saying this, but that's typical union worker, shows us 5 minutes later. But they had about 12 people who showed up in front of my house. I had about 30. Most of them from Milwaukee. I live in Whitewater, about an hour southwest of Milwaukee. So during this whole protest, we had to keep in mind that a lot of these people were coming from California, D.C., Illinois, Minnesota, and you know, I was always looking for the silver lining. That actually helped our economy. All these people coming there to protest. They were buying pizzas, renting rooms, drinking beer, eating cheese. Things Wisconsin is known for. So that helped our economy, and I appreciate that and I'm thankful. But we had to remember that even though there was thousands of them in the Capitol, as you'll see in the pictures, there was a larger group of real citizens back there who were the silent majority that we talked about that supported what we did. And when we came back on Monday, the Speaker told you he wasn't sure how many votes he might lose over a weekend of protesting. But like one representative from the Milwaukee area actually got a call on her cell phone and told her to get her kids out of her house. She was probably a no vote. She said, if they're going to do that, I'm going to vote yes on this budget repair bill. Now, one of the processes in caucus, we usually don't talk about what goes in caucus, but I believe in open government, is Joe is from Janesville. Joe's a member of UAW, or was a member of UAW, and worked in the plant. So a lot of his friends and family probably wasn't going to be too happy with the way he was going to vote. But he stood up in the middle of caucus and said, this might not be the best political move I will ever make, but it's the right thing for the citizens of Wisconsin, and I'm going to vote yes. For me, it was easy. As a paratrooper Marine, I like to fight. So for me, this was fitting into my career goal, getting into a fight. So it was an easier decision for me, but I have a lot of respect. And Joe, since then, we were friends, but we've become closer friends. Because this is one true politician that said, and I don't want to say he's a true politician, a true leader, who said he was going to represent the people of his district in the state of Wisconsin. No matter what would go on with his political career, he put the people before re-election.
You know, when he said I was a UAW member, a lot of you gasped. Oh my God. But I was a former UAW member. And I was a conservative working at General Motors all those years too. So, and there was a lot of people like that there. But Evan always tells that story and always gets me up here right to try to match that. But Evan, he's my bull in the China shop, paratrooper. And I got to tell a story about Evan. It was in the middle of the protest, thousands of people surrounding the Capitol. It was like a siege. And I had to leave for lunch to meet somebody, and Evan was walking out too, and they said, hey, let's walk out together. So Evan's like, yeah, let's go out this way. So we go out the east door. I didn't know at the time, but the east door, they had a stage set up for one of their rallies. So we walked right out in the middle of the protesters. We were 3 feet away from them. And they had escorts to open up paths for us to walk through. And so, of course, there's some former UAW members that I worked with. And they called me scab. So it wasn't that I was crossing the picket line, and that's what a scab is. It was because I was holding the line on spending and making the good decisions in Wisconsin. But Evan was walking out with me. And he never lets me forget this, because every time we get in the truck, although he did do it this morning, he's got the voice text. So what he had is his assistant text him a message on it and said, Joe is a scab. So when I get in the truck, he pushes the button, Joe is a scab. It just keeps me grounded. I know where I come from. But first of all, I want to thank you guys down here, because you pointed out the traitors from Wisconsin who left the state of Wisconsin instead of staying there and doing their job like they were supposed to. And we appreciate that, because that brought coverage to it. And there's a lot of people in our area that are very upset with our senator, who was probably down here during the day and in his bed in Janesville at night. But the police weren't going to do anything about it, and neither was the state patrol. And they knew he was doing it.
Excuse me, sir, why aren't you doing your job in Wisconsin today?
I'm leaving right now to do my job in Wisconsin.
Why didn't you do it earlier today, sir?
We believe we did do our job in Wisconsin.
But you didn't. You were supposed to be on the House, to at least be on the House floor to allow them to have a vote, and you didn't do it. Why not?
I'm not so sure that's my job today. My job today is to delay a vote on a piece of legislation. The people of the state have said we have not had time to consider the consequences.
What's your position there, sir, in the Senate?
Senator, let's get going.
What's your position in the Senate,
This
sir?
is my friend from the Tea Party.
What's your position in the Senate, sir?
We need to get going so we
Senator, why aren't you in Wisconsin doing your job?
I was
Why did you flee the state, sir? Why did you flee the state of Wisconsin so you wouldn't have to do your job, sir?
We're going to do our job right now.
Okay, what's your name, sir?
And we also want to thank your government down here because we're getting a lot of jobs from you guys right now. I hate to say that, but we've got some pictures here we can go through. It shows some of the things that went on up there in the Capitol, and we can give you a little commentary as we're going through them. I know we're running short. We've got about 43 slides, so we'll go through this quick and try to get through. If you have any questions when we're done, feel free to ask. We'd love to answer them. Okay, this is what the Capitol looked like before the protest. Beautiful building, historic building actually. Let me talk to it. This was the inauguration when Scott Walker was sworn into office. Go ahead.
I'd just like to say, when we first walked into the Capitol, a reporter asked me, what do you think, what do you feel being a newly elected member of the Assembly when you walk into a building this ornate? And I had to tell him I felt two feelings. One, it kind of reminded me of the palaces Saddam Hussein had with all the marble. But the other thing was embarrassment. Because this is the North Gallery, but the South Gallery, the West Gallery, and the East Gallery all look the same way. So my first few days in the Capitol, I get lost. And as a first sergeant, I don't know how many second lieutenants I used to really razz about getting lost. And I said, you know, I'm embarrassed because their second lieutenants are laughing at me now because I'm getting lost. But this was what the Capitol looked like. So when you heard stories that there was no damage done, you'll get to see photos of what occurred. There's some things that probably you won't be able to see, but because there were so many people and not as many bathrooms as desired, they would use corners and wall space for those type of activities.
Like I said, this is the governor's swearing in. And they actually had protests out there protesting that day against. They brought in a bunch of homeless people from Milwaukee by the busload to protest outside the Capitol. This is after the bill was announced, February 14th. This was the first day. That's how quick they were able to get people there mobilized through social networking. This is inside the Capitol. This was every day for Evan and I. We walked in. This is what our office looked like. If you could imagine going in to your office every day and seeing this.
And how many times have you heard the press, people out there talk about Tea Party rallies and the signs that we have at Tea Party rallies? But if you notice, you look at some of the signs over there comparing Walker to Hitler. There's posters where they had targets on Walker, gun sight type targets. So, you know, you need to be aware of that. So a lot of the things they accuse Tea Parties of doing, they're out there really doing.
This guy is a normal up there. He is up there all the time. There's a group of about 4 or 5 of them, and one of them is Segway Boy. And he's got probably about 50 citations, and the city will not press charges on, or won't continue on the prosecution of them. And this is one of his buddies that follow the legislators around when they walk out to restaurants and antagonize them.
And we've actually have a case where Representative Robin Voss was at a hotel bar when one of them came up and took a pitcher of beer and poured it over him. So when they say they're not assaulting legislators, they are. They spit on us, things like that.
I thought this one would be appropriate for the show here, of what they think of the Tea Party people. Chop from the top. Socialist workers gotta work. The other ones too. There was a lot of communists and socialists up there in the protesting crowd. It's pretty strong in the States. These are some of the other signs too. And it was all over the Capitol like this. There was not a clean wall in that building. But they did use blue painter's tape. Cuddle Puddle. Now we're going to be seeing some of the pictures of people that slept over there every night.
And it was amazing, as you can see, it got thicker and thicker. There was times you couldn't even walk through the hallways because of the number of people sleeping there. They also had tents. They had Coleman stoves, open cooking fires inside of the building. And I kept going to the Capitol Police Chief and saying, you know, I'm concerned about safety. Because what happens if a fire breaks out? What happens if something should stir up the group where they want to get out of the Capitol real quick? Because some of these people brought their 3-4-month-old babies. And you can imagine, you've heard the horror stories at rock concerts where people get crushed. You know, if something came up, what would happen there? There were tents, some of the Capitol Police.
There's one right there, a young child.
Would tell me they see tents that they thought were on fire because of the smoke, but it was marijuana. They caught young kids with 3 or 4 fifths of alcohol. It was a party as much as it was a protest.
Yeah, and I think in the month of November we're probably going to see some kids named Madison being born.
That was going on in the Capitol.
It was going on. They took over hearing rooms upstairs, and the protesters who came over and took them over, and they had daycares set up. They had tables set up on the main floor with cookers, and they made lunches and breakfasts and dinners there. But yeah, I mean, they had daycares, and they had one room that was set up to give you your work assignments for where you were to protest. These were the group of women that were sitting there meditating. That's the peaceful. Now this lady here, if you can see right there where the red dot is, that's a bike lock. And what she did, this is the gallery of the Senate, she took a bike lock and locked it around her neck and the rail, protesting. And they had to have a locksmith come in there and get it off. And she was arrested. This is a loudspeaker they had down in the rotunda. He looks pretty distraught. These are the drums. Every day we came in there was a constant beat of drums. 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 It's never stopped. It never stopped until they went to sleep. But they sat down and faced that rotunda and they banged. And it echoes through the whole building.
And if you see the gentleman with the drum there, with the mustache and goatee, and the gentleman holding the microphone, there are regulars. They're still there today. They might be the only 3 or 4 in the Assembly gallery, but they're there. They're also constantly harassing Robin Voss and some of the other representatives all the time. But if you listen to them, it's all about what they want. Pay for my college. Give me money. You know, they're not protesting for poor people. They're protesting for themselves.
This is in the floor of the rotunda. The signs all over the place. Honor labor. These are some of the protesters that had to be hauled out, that wouldn't move, they had to be carried, made a dramatic scene.
And you'll see that most of the police officers in these photos are the state police. Even though we got bills from the Madison City Police, Dane County Sheriffs, they actually refused to do anything. They stayed across the street. But then when it came time to get taxpayers' money, they were the first, I should say, hogs at the trough. And they were trying to charge the state for like paper, memory sticks, printer ink. How did that affect dealing with the protesters? I don't know, but they're complaining because we're refusing to pay them.
This is the guy that was in the earlier picture with the drum. His name is CJ. And the guy with the camera there, he has press pass now, where he can come down on the gallery of the Assembly, where the press sit. And it was a radio DJ in the city of Madison, a real liberal hack, who granted him the authority, the press authority, to come down here. Issued him a press pass. Peace. Please remember this is a peaceful protest, no violence. Now, these are some of the things that the senator up in Milwaukee, Lena Taylor, was protesting at Coke Industries. A lot of these are companies that employ about 3,000 people in the state of Wisconsin. Up in Green Bay area, if you wanted to shut that down. Hitler. These are the Democrats. Go ahead, Evan, you can talk on this one.
Yeah, I'm actually thinking about suing them because I'm afraid if I go hunting, I might start aiming at Orange. But the funny thing is they walked in on the floor, and normally there's a dress code that we have to wear a suit and tie. They came in with their little shirts, and so I brought in a red shirt that had white letters that said Wisconsin. And I got asked about it, and I said, well, if this is going to turn into NASCAR, I want to see everybody to see who I work for, and I want them to notice who they work for. But this was early on. This was early on in February. See the gentleman on the right? That's Andy Jorgensen. He's from Fort Atkinson. And because of redistricting, he would have to face a 20-year member of the Assembly, Steve Noss, probably the most conservative member of the Assembly before I got there. He's decided he's going to rent an apartment in Whitewater so he can run against me, which I look forward to. But you can see how they're cheering on this mob. But now, since the mob has gotten past their control, I always refer to this as Dr. Frankenstein no longer controls the monster Frankenstein, because they are actually losing their voice because these protesters will shout them down. We had, when you cross over the state line into the travel area of Wisconsin, we had a little reopening of it, and Senator Tim Cullen, the Democrat, spoke up, and he was going to make the crowd be quiet. So when he stepped up to the mic, they all cheered, and yeah, one of the 14 heroes. And then he said, we'd like you to show respect. This is not the time to protest. Please be quiet so we can hear from the Tourism Secretary, Stephanie Clay.
And the governor, too.
And the governor, but he was more concerned about the tourism. He didn't want to be seen as a friend of the governor. And they just didn't want to hear it. So all of a sudden, they turned on him and started calling him, what, a fake liberal?
They called him he's a fake liberal, yeah.
So they're losing control of the whole monster they created.
This is their class picture. Doesn't show much class, but this is what they did when they got their orange shirts on. Now this is the noon sing-along, which is still going on up there every day unless the Girl Scouts have the rotunda or a blood drive. But they all sit in a group like this, and they hang banners like that, and they got one guy that leads them, and he sings the songs. And they take all of our patriotic songs, and they change them to a Union theme. This one here, I think, was Roll Out the Barrel. And they get a couple of people out there to dance in the middle, and they change the songs to have the Union theme to them. It's for an hour, they sing.
And you know, they've been doing this since February, and I really don't have a problem with it. But the one guy with the hat, you'd think after about 9 or 10 months of practice, he'd be able to carry a tune. Well, we decided, I'm a member of the Rock River Patriots, and I got with them and several other different groups, the 912 group in Wisconsin, the Gainesville Tea Party. And on our first day back this fall, we asked them to come to the rotunda. So they got permits, they came to the rotunda, they put out their banner, "Don't Tread on Me," and we almost had a conflict because they didn't want to give up the Capitol because they see it as our capital. And not as our capital, but as their capital. So, you know, I thought it was a good thing for the Patriot groups, the Tea Party groups to come and show that it's also their capital.
And the thing is that the Patriot groups and the Tea Party groups did it legally. They got a permit to be there on the rotunda, which is what you're supposed to do. These guys do not have a permit, have never had a permit, and they're still allowed to do it. And that's because of Chief Tubbs, who used to be in Beloit, is now the Capitol Police Chief, and he made a deal with them. Now we're going to go outside. This is what it looked like up there in the February, March, outside the Capitol. We had walked through this every day until they finally, in a few days when it was really bad, they let us walk through a tunnel underneath the sidewalk to get to the Capitol.
And you know, during this period, teachers were leaving en masse from their school districts and going there because they felt so strongly about it. Got it. First Amendment right, feel strongly about it, come protest. But if you really feel that strongly about it, don't fake call in sick. Just don't get paid that day or take a day of leave. But they would show up, and then, of course, because they were gone 3 or 4 days, and because of it, there weren't enough substitute teachers, school districts had to close school. And so then they said, hey, if you're going to be doing this 3 days in a row, according to your contract, if you're sick 3 straight days, you have to have a sick slip. So some mighty fine doctors from UW-Madison showed up to give them sick cost slips on the corner. And, you know, that just shows you, you lose credibility with me because you've lost your integrity. If you're going to do it, okay, do it. But at least stand up for what you believe in and not try to hide behind a fake sick cost slip.
And this is the mess that they left behind. Because they weren't allowed to take the signs inside anymore, so they just threw them outside the door in the Capitol before they came in. And then they never picked them up. I mean, this was every day they had to clean these up.
And I always like the teacher signs that say, if you can read this, thank the teacher. But I'm on the education committee. And the first thing they tell us when we're trying to enforce, develop rules to evaluate teachers by, well, you can't evaluate us because most of it is because of good parenting. And if a child doesn't have a parent involved in education, there's hardly anything we can do. And so every time I see one of those signs, I go up to them and say, shouldn't you change your sign from, if you can read this, thank your parent?
These aren't the friendliest looking faces here, as you can see. The fist is a really big symbol up there. It's amazing how they have a sixth finger on there for the peninsula, but that group also has 57 states in the United States too. Make more than $150,000 a year, pay your fair share. All right. Now, Fred Clark, the recalls hadn't been announced yet, but he already had a state Senate poster. He was ready to go for the recall. Teamsters were a big deal up there. What they did was they parked 2 semis up there around the Capitol, and they just paid for the parking for 24 hours for about 3 or 4 weeks they were up there. Shame. Sorry the E got cut off there, but that's what they used to say to us when we'd walk in and walk through. They'd start yelling, shame.
I thought that was your name.
Scat's my name. This was done, I believe this was done to M&I Bank.
No, that's actually out in front of Department of Transportation building.
Oh, okay, thanks.
And that was painted on. But of course, you know, they'll tell you they didn't damage anything.
These are some of the other pictures. If you look down here, corner, that's a lot of people. Detroit, they're coming in, right? You know, so they were coming in from all over the place. Some of the more signs that they had. I thought that was kind of funny down here. We have earplugs and we have toys and crayons. So we're worried about earplugs, but what about the kids? You know, I mean, you got to take care of them too. This was the signing of the bill. Evan was there. I wasn't. I couldn't get up here. He walked. You got to tell him that story.
Yeah, they called because the governor was having a hard time to find enough legislators to stand behind him and sign the bill. And one of the reasons is because he decided to sign the bill on a Friday. Most Fridays, legislators are back in their district. They didn't announce it ahead of time. They just kind of announced that, can you get to the Capitol in the next hour? So I said, sure, I'll drive up from Whitewater. It's about a 45-minute drive. And I got there and I just walked through the Capitol. I know the governor's office is on the first floor. So I just walked right through the rotunda of the thousands of people there, got to the top. There was a state trooper there. And there was this elderly woman, and she said to me, what are you doing? I said, well, go find a TV and watch the news. You'll see in about 5 minutes. And then the state trooper said, Representative Wynn, why did you go through here? Why didn't you come in through the back door? And I didn't know the governor had a back door. But we got there, and the governor signed the bill. which gave rights back to the taxpayers.
And that's it. So you guys have any questions?
Isn't Ohio doing the same thing with their issue too, or something?
Yeah, Ohio passed a bill, but in Ohio they can do a referendum to try to overturn it.
Citizens are voting on it.
Yeah, and that's coming up in November. Kasich is really fighting against that. I hope that Ohio learned from Wisconsin that their messaging is better. Because one thing I will say is that our messaging by the governor and executive branch was terrible. They could have messaged it better, and more of the normal people out there, the non-union people, would understand what we were doing. I mean, I had people that had never been in a union, hated unions, call me up and ask me why I was taking the workers' rights away. And I told them, I explained to them that, first of all, they're not rights. I was a union member, I paid for those. When I left General Motors and I went to work somewhere else, I didn't take them with me. And if there were rights, I could take them with me. And I didn't. They were paid for privileges.
And it was interesting because of how it worked. On the first Monday while we were debating the bill, it was a well-organized event. They had tents out there. They would assign people to come see specific legislators. So on Monday, all the people, I am a teacher. I have a license to teach 5 different subjects, K through 12. The first Monday of the debate, they had teachers that I worked with show up and tell me I should vote no. Then the second day, they found other people from my past that I had known to contact me, whether they were from the Army or other, I coach football too, fellow coaches to call me up and ask me how I was going to vote. Then the third day, a union leader showed up. And he basically told me, look, we'll give you as much you want to take from the employees, you take. If you want to take 10%, 15% for retirement, you take it. 2 things we got to have is we have to have you collect the union dues automatically from their paycheck, because without that, we'll lose about 30% of our income, and you can't take away collective bargaining because now you're dealing with my power. And we'll work with you on any other things that you want to work with, because the people will pay what we tell them to pay, but don't take our power. And then they showed up at my house, and I told them, look, the only way I won't vote for this bill is if Jesus comes. I won't be here. You got the state.
I think we have time for a couple more questions. Quick.
Yeah, there's 421 school districts. Only 204 have filed to recertify. None of them have done the process, but they've notified the state that they are going to do that. A lot of the school districts, and when I talk to administrator, superintendent, they never want to go on record, but they are so glad that we did this, because in just one school district, going from, the union has their own insurance company they own. We have trust, which provides health insurance. Now, since school districts don't have to, because in collective bargaining agreement, these agreements said, not only do you have to give us this tier 1 health care, but you have to buy it from our union. So because of that, now they can send it out for bids. And insurance companies saying, we can't even keep up with all the bid requests because we're getting so many bid requests. And they're finding they're saving anywhere from $500,000 to several millions of dollars, because we at Trust would sell them health care premiums that were about $1,800 a month for a family care plan. And so the school districts were paying $1,800 a month, and they had made a deal with the unions that said, look, if 2 teachers are married, since that $1,800 a month covers a family plan, if we don't have to pay that $1,800 a month for the spouse, would you do it? The union said, yeah, just give them the $1,800. And so they were able to negotiate that down to about $1,000. But that way, you can see where all this money wasn't going to instruction or kids. It was going to, back to We a Trust, the union insurance.
We only have a chance for one more question. I'm sorry.
We can answer that for you when we're done. You guys, if anyone else got more questions, we'll take one more question. And, well, the problem is, I think the big problem is, they do it at noon, and most Tea Party people work. And they can't take the day off to work, come up there and protest. But these guys are paid protesters or they're state workers on their lunch.
One quick note, I know we're running short on time. Segway Boy, who gets a lot of the press, actually has a website, and on his page it says, I need to receive $2,400 a month in donations so I can pay for my apartment. Because if I don't do this, I'll have to do something I never had to do yet. And I said, get a job. So you have to give him some points for being honest.
But thanks a lot. We appreciate being invited down here. If you have any other questions, you can talk to everyone.
I have to say, the party is amazing. They're lucky, so we don't go over there and beat them up.
I just want to be teabagged.
Okay, well, why are you over here, sir?
I just want to be teabagged.
Okay, well, could you tell me why you are over here and not with the folks over across the street?
Because I want to be teabagged.
Okay.
In 1787, I'm told our founding fathers all sat down and wrote a list of principles that's known the world around. The USA was just starting out a whole brand new country, and so our people spelled it out. They wanted a land of liberty, and the preamble goes like this. We the people, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America.